Okay, it's 7 o'clock, and then call the village board meeting to order. Please silence all cell phones during the meeting. I look for the approval of the agenda. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Item 3, public appearances and citizens' comments on items not listed on this agenda. Items will not be debated or acted upon at this meeting, but will be referred to the proper staff or committee if action is required. Please keep comments to 3 minutes. For anyone who would like to speak? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to item 4, approval of the consent agenda. Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any additions or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Here, we'd like to move, the Friends of Chalet Golden Fleece 10th anniversary proclamation up to this point on the agenda. And Larry was gonna make the presentation. We need a motion to do that, or? Yeah, we'll need a motion to move that item up. Okay, motion second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Larry?
This is the Friends of the Chalet of the Golden Fleece 10th anniversary proclamation. Whereas the Friends of the Chalet of the Golden Fleece are celebrating their 10th anniversary this year, and whereas over the past decade, the Friends have been operating the Chalet of the Golden Fleece Museum on behalf of the village, and whereas the Friends have provided guided tours, written grants, taken care of the collection, and performed renovations at the chalet since 2013. And whereas it is the desire of the New Glarus Board of Trustees to recognize that commitment of the Friends of the Chalet of the Golden Fleece, who have helped maintain the chalet and get it going again, as well as making it a destination for village residents and tourists alike. Now, therefore, on behalf of the New Glarus Board of Trustees, I hereby recognize and thank the Friends of the Chalet of the Golden Fleece for their 10 years of service, operating this gift from and residents of Edwin Barlow Manor. And those of you who are part of that are really who we are recognizing. If you would please stand so we could acknowledge. Thank you. Anyone would like to speak a few words?
Well, I'll just say, for all of us, it's a labor of love, and, there are times when it is a lot of work, and there are times when it is just fun. We love having the tours going on and the reactions that people have when they see what we have to offer. It's really a fun place to be on a Saturday, and we're gonna shoot for 10 more years. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, if you ladies would still want to stay through the whole meeting, you can if you want to. It's up to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay, at this time, we'll have a presentation by WPTI Energy presentation on rates and financial planning.
Well, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak at your village board meeting this evening. My name is Tim Amons. I'm the Director of Rates at WPTI Energy.
Sir, you up there,
That's
lower
me.
right-hand corner.
Yep, that's me. Yep. Director of Rates. I've been with WPTI for about 22 years. I've been working with municipal utilities, rate regulation, electric utilities, water utilities, wastewater, financial planning, and things like that for probably about 28 years. With the recent rate study that happened last year and the requirement to file a new rate study, another rate study, by July 31st of 2024, Lauren reached out to Beth Carlson, the Energy Services Manager here, and asked if I would, just give a very brief overview of utility rates, utility finances, and utility regulation. Why are utilities, electric utilities regulated? Where does the revenue come from? With that, I'll get started. I've got some handouts if anybody wants one. I should probably go around.
Okay.
So, in order to discuss public utility finances and public utility regulation, we have to define what a public utility is. And according to Webster, this is it. It's a business deemed by law to be vested with public interest, usually because of monopoly privileges, and is subject to public regulations such as fixing of rates, standards of service, and provision of services. So, the key point to think about a public utility is provides an essential service, okay, and it's a monopoly. Okay, those are really the two defining things that that we're looking at when we're looking at a regulated utility. And just a little bit of background on utility regulation. Utility regulation is not new. This has been going on, it has its origins back in English law back from the 1600s. When they recognized that there were certain industries and businesses that provided an essential service and provided and protected the public interest, where there needs to be some sort of regulation on this to make sure that the service was adequate, make sure that the cost of the service was reasonable and things like that. So it's been going on for centuries, and some of the industries that typically have been regulated in the past, the railroads, chimney sweeps, you believe that, toll bridges, those are the few. And currently, what we're talking about here is regulated electric utility industries, and water. So we talked about a little bit about regulation, what a public utility is. So now, why is the rate making portion of an electric utility regulated? And state regulation protects the consumers in the absence of competition. Okay, that is the key meaning or the key purpose of having regulation, the lack of competition. And electric utilities, just in general, lend themselves to be monopolies. And monopolies, by definition, do not have competition. So, in the absence of that competition, the state comes in and regulates the utilities as far as what their finances are, the rates they can charge, and things like that. Utilities that are monopolies. It's not practical to have competing utilities within the same service territory. For one thing, where would you put all of that infrastructure? say Alliant was in here and was competing with your customers, they have their lines and their poles, Polaris' line and pole, it would just be a mess. So it just does not lend itself to competition. So regulation, the state statutes express the policies of how utilities should be regulated. And then the agencies that are responsible for that regulation, they administer and adopt rules and regulations on on their interpretation of the statutes. And then the state commissions can issue quasi-judicial orders and decisions. Quasi-judicial are just, they're non-judicial entities that have the ability to interpret the law. The Public Service Commission of Wisconsin is a quasi-judicial entity, and that's the organization that regulates all of the electric utilities and water utilities in Wisconsin. So these are some of the rights that public utilities have when they receive the authority to serve a given area. We talked about that they're a natural monopoly, okay? It only makes sense cost-wise to limit the amount of infrastructure in any given area. They have a franchise to serve a defined area. So no other entities can come in and intrude on that service territory to compete with your customers. And these last two, the utilities, because of they're coming in and providing service, a necessary service, they can charge rates to cover the reasonable cost of service. Okay, and they're entitled to earn a fair and reasonable return on their investment. Okay, so the discretion or what the Public Service Commission has done in their rules and regulations, they've defined what is a reasonable cost of service and what is a reasonable and fair return on their investment. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So these last, like I said, these last two bullet points really kind of loosely define what the utilities can recover through their rates. Okay, now we talked about their rights. Now they have responsibility. They've been given this right to serve. They've been given this right to recover their costs and to earn a fair return on their investment. What are their responsibilities? Well, they have to serve all the customers within that service territory, and they can't discriminate customers by providing different, beneficial services. Residential customers, the general service customer is a general service customer. You can't, you put together a rate structure to serve a class of customers, and you can't give special deals or anything like that. They need to provide safe and reliable service. And their responsibility is to not build unnecessary facilities and to not incur costs for unnecessary services. So the utility's job, the electric utility, is to provide electric service. So all of the costs that the utility incurs that it can recover through rates need to be related to providing electric service. Okay? And it needs to be a reasonable cost. So, for example, let's use a car analogy. If a Chevy Impala will do the job, the utility can't go out and buy a Cadillac Eldorado to do the same purpose. Okay? It has to be a reasonable, functional cost for the utility in order to be able to recover through their rates. And finally, another responsibility for having this franchise to serve a particular area, they have to open their books up to the regulators. Because the regulators they're charged through the state statutes, to make sure that customers are being protected, and that, you know, they're not being taken advantage of, and, you know, that regulation is providing an alternative to competition.
On the last one, is there a written report that comes from regulators on that open book?
Well, there's several, okay? The utility annually has to file an annual report with the Public Service Commission, which lists all of their financial, operating and maintenance expenses, plant that's been put in service.
So we have that here.
We have that, you have that here. And anytime the utility does a rate study, that gets analyzed by the Public Service Commission as well. So this, you know, this is the state statute that gives the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin, the ability to regulate electric utilities in Wisconsin, in lieu of competition. It's 196.03, paragraph 1. Utilities shall furnish reasonably adequate service and facilities. You know, doesn't have to be a gold-plated, facility, but it has to be reasonably adequate service and facilities. And any charges that the utility makes for providing heat, light, water, telecommunications, whether it's delivering, producing, transmitting that power, has to be reasonable and just. And anything that does not fall within that scope of being a reasonable cost to provide reasonable service is considered unjust and unreasonable and would not be allowed to be recovered. So this paragraph right here kind of defines what's called your revenue requirement. And we'll get into that in a little bit later. This also is the paragraph that allows the utility to earn a reasonable margin on its investment. So, say for example, the utility has invested $2 million in its infrastructure. The utility is allowed to earn a return on that $2 million. Okay. Now that return is not profit; it's net income, and there is a difference between profit and net income, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. So let's talk a little bit about that return on investment. You take the $2 million that the utility, in this example, has invested in its system to provide service to its customers. That's its gross planned service. And then every year, the utility will depreciate a portion of that. And as time goes past, that annual depreciation adds up, and you get what's called accumulated depreciation. And in order to find your net plant in service and what the utility can earn a return on, you take that gross plant in service, subtract the accumulated depreciation, and what's left is called your net plant in service. And that's what you're allowed to earn a return. So you take that net investment rate base and you multiply it by a bookmark return percentage. Now, when New Glarus filed its last rate study, that bookmark percentage was 4.9%.
What does that mean?
So, for example, if the utility has $2 million.
No, I understand that concept. What does it mean that there's a 6 up there or a 4.9? What does that mean?
They can earn 4.9% of that net plant in service as their net income.
Who said that?
That is set by formula in the Public Service.
With the first sentence of 66, whatever it is, 0801 says we're the same as the private. Are you saying that the private utilities only can use 4.9?
The private utilities, cannot use more than that because they have investments that they have to provide a return.
But it doesn't say that.
Well, I mean, you would,
660811.
yeah,
Rate of return shall be the same as permitted for private.
where are you seeing that?
60 statute 66.0811.
What page are you on, Bo?
I looked it up.
I
don't need an answer to that
I'll have to
right
get
now.
back to you on that.
I'm
And what is
interested in
it?
this, and, but let's not, we can figure this out later. I'm just curious that there are two numbers up there.
Yep.
Neither of which strike me as reasonable when inflation is over 6. Question.
66.08, paragraph 1.
On page 12.
66.0811.
Or, not page 12, page 6. Item 11.
So is it in here somewhere?
Yeah.
This
Page
is-
6.
This is the tail end of 11. This says what happens after you get,
Oh,
after you've
gotcha.
covered all your
Gotcha.
expenses, what you do.
Yep.
The first sentence of 0811 says, we're the same as a private utility. I don't need you to solve that problem for us tonight. It's just something that occurs to me when it comes to determining rate of return.
So are you looking at transfers to the municipality?
That's the end of 811.
Okay. So your
I'm at the
question
beginning.
is what before that?
It's the opening sentence for 0811. We don't have to talk about it now.
I will look at that,
Okay.
and see what the difference is. I do know that private utilities, Alliant, Subservice, We Energy, MTD, use the same rate-making methodology
Yes.
that municipal utilities use. They have different capital structures because of their investors that they have. Different types of capital, things like that. So they have to earn a return for their investors in order to provide them, you know, their investment. Alliant, We Energies, investor utilities are for-profit companies. Municipal utilities are non-for-profit companies. So that plays a difference in the amount of the return that they're allowed to recover through rate. So we're talking, you know, about, you know, a for-profit company versus a non-profit company.
Yeah, but ROE is after tax.
ROE, not in this. Well, yes, it is. It is after tax.
Right. Right. I mean, there's a way for that to equal out. But why don't you go on with your thing here, and
All right.
I'll figure out how to get answers to some of these questions that I've got. Let's not take time tonight.
Okay. When New Glarus filed its last rate study, the municipal rate of return for any municipal in the state was 4.9%.
All 55 of yours were at 4.9. You represent 55 something municipal utilities.
If all of our members would have filed a rate study at that same time,
Yeah.
they would have gotten 4.9%.
Okay.
Since that point, the benchmark rate of return has gone to 6%. And that's based on a Baird Municipal Utilities Index. They take a three-month rolling average, add 2% adder, and that's generally what is used for a rate of return. it's a good question, and we'll get into, some more specifics about that a little bit later on. So you take your net investment rate base, multiply it by that benchmark rate of return. That is theoretically the net income that the utility can earn, through its rates, okay? And the net income, is the income available after all operating expenses, after payment of taxes, after pilot, depreciation, it's everything, in excess of all of those operating expenses.
So where it says O and M, O is operating and M is
Operating and maintenance.
maintenance. Okay, thank you.
And depreciation expense is kind of highlighted here a little bit. I just wanted to talk a little bit about depreciation.
Fun with one line.
Depreciation expense, it's a non-cash expense. You don't get an invoice for depreciation. There's no cash outlay associated with depreciation. It's an expense used to run the utility, but there's no cash associated with it. It's a cost recovery mechanism. And it's a way to recover the cost of an asset over the life of the asset. And we talked a little bit about this earlier. The accumulated depreciation is the sum of the depreciation expense accrued over time. So, for example, you've got $1 million asset that you put in service. It has a 20-year life, okay? You pay $1 million for that asset up front. You collect the cost of that asset, $50,000 a year over 20 years. Okay? So there's a delay of when you pay for that asset and when you recover the cost of that asset. Any questions regarding that? Next, we'll talk about debt service and annual renewal and replacement. Now, nowhere in the rate making process, in the revenue requirement, is there a line item that says debt service, or is there a line item that says annual renewal and replacement? These are costs that the utility incurs and that require cash, but they're not specifically identified within the revenue requirement. The utility needs to recover through rates enough cash annually to cover its debt service and to provide for its annual renewals and replacement. Now, by annual renewals and replacements, I'm talking about, utility replaces X number of poles per year. They replace X number of, X number of line transformers. These are maintenance type things. Utility doesn't want to borrow funds in order to replace these maintenance assets. So you have to have enough cash on hand to provide for those annual renewals. And for those annual renewals or replacements, when you're replacing them, obviously you have to take, say if you're putting a new pole in, you have to take the old pole out of service. Okay? And if it's not, fully depreciated, you have to make an adjustment not only to your plant and service, but also to your accumulated depreciation. So it really helps to know where your assets are throughout the utility, how old they are, when they are put in service, and how much of their life has been used or accounted for already. So having a good way of tracking your assets, in order to facilitate and make these calculations more accurate, is definitely a positive, definitely a plus, to the financial health and well-being of the utility. Because if you don't know where your assets are, how old they are, when they were put in place, you know, you're kind of guessing, you know, as to when you put a pole in place, what you should take out of service. Debt service, you know, those are recovered, those are identified in your bond. A typical debt service coverage is 1.5% of your annual principal and interest. It's a typical, not everyone is the same, but that's pretty typical. So you have to have enough cash on hand in order to make both debt service coverage and to provide for those renewals and replacements. The only place within the revenue requirement where you can generate that cash is through your net income, okay? Which before I said is not profit, and this is why. And depreciation expense, because depreciation expense generates cash, but there's no cash outlay associated specifically with it. So those two mechanisms within your revenue requirement, the net income and depreciation expense, are where the utility generally gets its funds for its annual renewals and replacements and for its debt service.
So your last line. On depreciation, that is an expense, you just didn't spend it.
It's not a cash expense.
Right, you write it down, so if your depreciation expense was $10, you got $10, you didn't spend it, it's over here.
Yep.
Okay.
So you recovered $10 the cost of an asset.
Right, the asset was 1,000.
Yep, exactly. We talked a little bit about annual renewals and replacements. New substations, you know, obviously are not annual renewals and replacements. Those are expenses that happen very, very frequently. They're very expensive, and those are generally issued or paid for with debt. Utilities, electric utilities, are very capital intensive, much more so than most other industries. It takes a lot of investment in order to provide service to your customers, and a lot of times that investment is very lumpy. So you'll be going along like this, you know, and all of a sudden, boom, your investments go way up like that because you have to put in $4 million something. So
That's when somebody built something really big a mile from your village, which we just did.
So where was I going with that? So that has a lot to do with your debt to equity ratio, and has a lot to do with how the Public Service Commission is going to view the utility as being financially healthy or not. Okay? Because you could be running along, you know, having a really good debt to equity ratio. You spend $4 million on a substation, boom, now your debt is way up and your equity hasn't changed. So your capital structure changes significantly as these big projects are put in place. So this is a question we get a lot from some of our members, is when can transfers to the general fund be made? And, you know, as was pointed out previously, they can only be made after utility has met its O&M expenses, depreciation, interest, debt service, local and school tax equivalents, additions and improvements. Those are those annual renewals and replacements we were talking about, and any other disbursement or indebtedness. So utility has to fund all of its costs of providing service, the entire gamut, before it can even consider transferring any funds to the general fund. And that's regulated by the state of Wisconsin. Now, one thing that needs to be considered, if the utility is considering making a transfer to the general fund, an electric utility is a business, it's a going concern. So, it has working capital requirements. There's a lag between when it incurs expense and when it gets revenue from its customers. So it has to have enough cash on hand to float that until they get that revenue. A minimum benchmark is probably 90 days of working capital on hand, 90 days of expenses of working cash on hand. And the utility has to have enough reserves to cover not only its annual renewals and replacements, but it also wants some cushion in case of some catastrophic event. A tornado comes through and takes down a third of your distribution. The customers can't wait for the utility to issue debt to get those services back online. So the utility has to have the funds available in order to rebuild those systems as needed. So those are just, two things to consider if the utility gets in a position where it's thinking about making a transfer to the general. Any questions regarding that?
Is that done often? That moves, municipalities put that into the general fund, or they always want?
It doesn't happen often that a transfer to the general fund is made from the electric utility outside of payment in lieu of tax. Okay. Payment in lieu of taxes is the one allowed transfer to the city that can be recovered through rates. Okay. Generally speaking, utilities, especially municipal utilities, run on a fairly tight budget. They generally don't have a lot of excess cash that they're sitting on over and above what it takes to fund the utility. The Public Service Commission is not going to generally, they're going to catch that before it gets to that point.
So I want to go back to your, the rate case. Let's say you build a substation and it is determined that your income is 4.9. Okay, now you're going along 6 months, you have a huge storm, takes out part of your utility, and you have to make investments.
Mm-hmm.
Can you apply for another rate case because of that?
Yes, you can. Okay. But a rate case generally takes 9 months to a year. So you have to, it's financially beneficial to have some reserves on hand in order to cover those costs up front. So you don't have to wait for selling bonds. You don't have to wait for a rate adjustment. Those are things that happen after the fact if there's a big tornado or ice storm or something like that.
And then the other question I have is if you, train of thought here, if you are, it just seems, if it's set, if set at 4.9 and the cost of things are going up, okay, so your 4.9 is not really as profitable as it used to be. At what point then do you determine that you need to have a rate case? Is there a formula for that, or is there a percentage of rate of return that says, okay, this is a red flag here?
Well, if your rate of return starts going negative,
Okay. See, I always thought it was like 2%. If it drops below 2%, then you can apply for rate, I don't know where I heard that.
You don't, there's no threshold on when you can apply for a rate case. A lot of the driving factors are, just general inflation, like you mentioned, which erodes your rate of return, and you start digging into some of that working capital or reserves that you've set aside just to make your operation and maintenance expensive. Okay, so if you get to that point, it's time to consider a rate adjustment, no matter what your rate of return is. Okay? If you're digging into your reserves in order to make paper operational expenses, that's the right way.
Okay, one more question. Can a utility invest? So you said you have to have, liquid cash readily available, in case you have a outage of some sort or storm, ice storm, but is there an expectation that there will be more money than that and you can invest? Or public utilities cannot make investments?
They can certainly make investments.
They can,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So how is the reserve different than the general fund? I mean, you can make a payment to the reserve, but you're under more restrictions making a payment to the general fund?
Well, the general fund, just goes into the general fund of the village.
Right.
If you're holding it in reserve for the utility, it's specifically for the utility. It's specifically for utility contingency.
If you deal with that in the next page.
So that's not limited to 3 months of working cash, is it? You can have a reserve
The
bigger
reserve-
than that?
The reserve is in addition to your working cash.
Okay.
The working cash is just really a cushion to cover that ebb and flow of when you incur expenses and when you get revenues.
So is it true that, from what you said about transfers to the general fund? Question, how often do it happen? Very seldom. So does it follow that the commission just doesn't want to see transfer to the general fund because that would be considered a profit?
If the utility is in a position where it's, sitting on a lot of revenue in excess of its working capital and in excess of its reserves, the Public Service Commission is going to look at that and say, your rates are too high.
So that's true, what I just said.
Try to make it that, they're gonna say what?
Your rates are too high. If you're collecting in excess of,
But if we're in excess of 6%, then you're charging too much. But if you're up to 6, you're not charging too much.
exactly.
Right.
But if
You're entitled to that ROE.
you're entitled to that hourly. Yep. But if the utility gets to a position where, it's sitting on, an excessive amount of cash greater than working capital and reasonable reserves for contingencies, the Public Service Commission is going to look at that and say, you're probably charging too much for your rate. And it doesn't happen frequently, but I have seen utilities who have been in that position who are allowed a lower rate of return than what benchmark is.
So it seems to me if you're getting near that point, you better build a solar farm or something to decrease it and gain assets at the same time.
Well, that's the only way a utility earns net income is by building.
Yeah.
You earn a return on your assets.
But it's the assets of the utility as a whole. It's not 6 on water, 6 on, it could be 10 on water and 2 on electric. It's a combination of all 3. It's the utility as a whole that is not to exceed or can earn up to 6 ROE, right? Not the individual part.
It's the individual parts.
It is the individual
Yeah.
part.
The electric utility can earn 6%. The water utility can earn 6%.
the electric use earned 4 and the water is 8, the net is 6.
True, but the electric utility could go in for a rate adjustment to get it.
So 1/3 of the utility can come in for a rate adjustment.
Well, the water utility and the electric utility are separate enterprise. They're separate businesses. At least they should be. Okay?
Okay.
They have their own books, their own set of operating expenses, their own, revenue stream. They make their own pilot payments. They have their own plant accounts, their own 1M accounts. They're two separate entities.
The pilot payment based on.
Pilot payments are based on the gross plant in service at the beginning of the year and the
We're talking
City
the
limit.
actual, physical.
physical plant in service.
Physical plant's, value
Yeah.
or the money generated?
The
Yeah.
value of the assets that are installed in the ground.
Okay, and that's based on,
Well, when you put an asset in the ground, say, you put in, a distribution feeder for, $500,000 10 years. It's in the books at $500,000. It doesn't appreciate in value.
but it's based on, it's based on the cost.
It's based on the cost.
So if we put in a substation, based on the cost of that.
It's based on the installed cost. So not just the asset itself, but the labor associated with putting it.
Total cost of the installation, and then that's the same as our tax rate.
So the depreciation isn't based on labor,
Depreciation is
the value of the asset,
It's based on the life of
of the life of the asset.
the asset. So, say a substation has a life of 20 years.
Yep.
You will recover the cost of that asset over 20 years.
And it's
in a
always
linear-
divided by that number, 20 or 30 or
Yep.
5, and then equal for all,
Yep.
each year.
It's a linear depreciation.
And then if you pull it out when it's half, say, left, what happens? You lose that depreciation?
Well, that's called
Once
a
you
stranded,
pull it
that's
out.
called a stranded cost.
Oh, maybe this is getting to be too much.
So you have to, if you pull it out when it's half depreciated,
You wouldn't, but if
you
you
have to
did,
take the full thing out of plant and service.
Right.
And then you have to take the accumulated depreciation associated with that out of accumulated depreciation. Because you've recovered half of that cost.
yeah,
The remaining is called a stranded asset, which can be recovered through rates, in very certain.
Do we have a basis right now for our pilot? payment?
you have to keep track of all
For the north substation.
We.
So it's done in our auditors.
I don't know.
A lot of it's done in our auditors.
this.
They're the ones that make our plant fees.
Annually?
I mean, we get our.
Every year.
Okay, I figured that.
I think we gotta keep moving on, we got all.
Yeah.
Right. Good process, yeah.
All right, I think we're getting close to the end.
Put no questions.
So, what we talked about so far, has been generally how, utility finances work. What isn't allowed in the public service.
Mhm.
Things like that. This next few slides, we're gonna talk about New Glarus specifically. And in its last docket from April 22nd, 2022, there was an order point in there that said, the applicant may not distribute any surplus income or make any other fund transfers except for payment in lieu of tax. And we'll get into why that is in a little bit. The village of New Glarus has to, if they want to do something like that, they have to ask commission approval first. And this order point will stay in effect until It's requested to be removed by the utility and the commission. Okay. Now, why did the commission put that? Well, because of your capital structure, because of this huge investment in the street, the debt to equity ratio got a little wonkus, a little skewed. So they said in their analysis that the 4.9% return, okay, would not provide sufficient debt service coverage on utility existing debt. Okay. So what the utility did, or what the commission did, instead of increasing that rate of return, they gave the utility $125,000 some odd cash ad. So they said, you know, with this 4.9% rate of return and this $125,000 cash adder, utility will then have a debt service.
Where did that 125 come from?
That was a calculated number that was backed into.
No. Yeah, who wrote the check into our utility for that amount?
That's what you recover through your rate. You recover that $125,000, it's embedded in your base rate.
So we just.
So it's prospective.
It is prospective.
Okay. The way, on the next page you wrote it, I thought maybe that we had to write a check for that amount.
No,
Okay.
that's, so we can go to that next slide.
But that's just, that 125, 689. That's just what we can increase charges?
That is
To the
what is built into your current rates in order to provide 1.5%.
Right, so it comes out
So,
of the consumers.
yep, the combination of the rate of
They
return,
just said we could charge more for
yep,
for what we deliver.
yep, in order to make sure the utility had proper debt service coverage. So, with the rate of return, which I believe was $98,000 or something, and the 125,689, plus the depreciation expense, the utility has enough funds to make it debt service coverage and to provide for annual renewal. Okay. But not a lot more. Okay. So the commission.
The annual renewals and replacements are, that figure is based on an average.
An average.
Okay.
Say the utility puts in, an average of, $200,000 a year of non-routine additions. A non-routine addition, for example, would be a substation. That's what they're figuring, that's what their annual renewal and replacements.
So the community is gonna pay for that.
The community is paying for the
Right, who's ever getting
the
it,
customers,
the customers are gonna pay for that.
through their base.
Yep.
Tim, I'm confused now. Point 3, commission determined rate was not sufficient for debt service, et cetera, right?
Yep.
Basically, the second thing is renewals, that's just operating, right?
Renewal and replacements are not operating expenses. They're routine maintenance additions to plant in service.
Okay, you call it that, I call it operating. You gotta fix the doorknob and keep the furnace running and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so, are we now on a 6?
No, you're still on a 4.9.
So
Because when this was
the
approved,
last thing it says, we have to show by 2024 to reevaluate. We're losing money, we're losing position every day, right? Why don't we file now?
We're in the process.
we're in the process.
What does that mean?
We're putting together a rate study.
When will that be done?
9 months.
Hmm?
9 months.
That's when it's decided. When will it be filed?
It takes,
Well,
How about tomorrow?
well, we can't file it tomorrow.
They're doing a study right now
Yeah.
to file it. You gotta do it because we just had one, so you gotta wait, add another year, let's say this year of your operation. correct me if I'm wrong, Jimmy.
That's why the presentation is now, so that.
So you have to wait a year.
They're,
And they.
they're evaluating it right now,
We're still.
so we can file.
They wanna see, you know, the requirement is to file a rate study by July 31st, 2020. They wanna see, they wanna gather enough data to see if that 4.9% plus that 125,000 is sufficient to provide for annual renewals and replacement and that sort of stuff. And we can, you know, we can file 2024 test year, anytime after August 1st this year. That's another requirement. The cutoff,
Intervals.
the cutoff for a test year is August 1st.
Okay.
Anything filed off after August 1st of this year would be considered a 2024 test.
Okay.
And that's the requirement, is to have a 2024 test year filed no later than July 31st.
So what did you? Best case scenario, when could we file it?
The 2022 annual reporting?
Yeah.
Yeah, and file on April 30th.
Okay. So, you know, once we get that, and once we get, budget information for 2024, you know, budget, operating and maintenance budget, capital budget, you know, things like that. Then we could, you know, put all that stuff together and get a study ready and get ready for file. So, depends on when
Best
you,
case scenario?
depends on when the utility does their budget.
Our budget is officially approved in the beginning of November, usually.
It's frugal.
November, beginning of November.
According to the timeline.
So,
And historically, how we've done it, yeah, to align with tax.
best case scenario, we're still looking at 2024.
Yeah.
Rather than tomorrow.
There's certain parameters that need to go into the rate. 3 years of historical data,
3 years ago.
historical data.
We must have that because we file an annual report.
Yep, so we have 22, 21, and 20. Okay, so we would have that. We need a budget. What's the budget gonna be for 2024?
Yep.
You know, we need to get an idea of what inflationary costs are gonna be. Are there gonna be, you know, wage adjustments? You know.
Is this one of the costs of a monopoly, as the expenses come first, the revenue comes later?
Essentially.
Okay.
So you determine what your expenses are, and then you adjust your revenue
And pray.
to cover that, to earn a return on your.
And the offset to that is reserves. You build enough in the way of cash reserves and liquidity to cover yourself that your revenue is gonna lag your expense.
Yes, that's working capital.
Okay.
We need to have.
I don't hate you yet, Tim, but I'm getting there.
You what?
I don't hate you yet, but I'm getting there.
So is there a typical time period of needing to file case study to increase? Is there a typical, are we always behind the 8 ball?
Not always. You know, there's 3 driving factors that typically would dictate whenever you see. One is, you know, general, inflationary increase. You know, fuels, wages, you know, just stuff like that. I mean, those increase over time. Another is, large capital addition, a substation. You know, that is going to drive rate setting. The third is the gain of or loss of a large customer. If you were to lose a large customer, that provided a significant amount of revenue over and above purchase power, that puts the utility at a shortfall and dictates the need for rate adjustment. Because those costs to serve that customer have not gone away. It's just that you're not recovering
especially.
we have a large enough customer?
I think
Yeah.
farms,
School.
The brewery and the.
brewery.
Well, a lot of breweries, the LA Lab House put solar panels on, which so far is costing us. Do we get to determine what the break point is on solar?
We're working on that so hard, I tell ya.
That's a big.
I don't wanna be using an MG&E rule.
Yeah, we're trying to develop, well, we're trying to get approved parallel generation tariff that is applicable and friendly to municipal utilities.
I mean, we want to encourage it, so there's gotta be a period of time in which this one-to-one ratio thing allows the homeowner to recover their investment.
Yep.
But on a long-term basis, one-to-one provides no room for Kevin's salary. Right, so we gotta get around that.
Even if a solar system is sized exactly to the size of the customer's load, it's still costing you too much money. Because you're not recovering any fixed cost. Because that customer is getting credited the retail rate. And the retail rate includes not only purchase power, which is the avoided cost that solar is.
We should hear the payback period that guys are doing these public utilities, public installations, like a school district or something like that. We're talking a 5-year payback.
I mean, it's a huge problem right now. And it's on our radar screen, and we are in communications with Public Service Commission weekly, on trying to get this resolved.
So who's gonna put up the, power generating pumps for all the electric cars? Is the community gonna do that, or is that gonna be a private gas station type?
Oh, the charging station?
Yeah, exactly, there's another thing.
Running diesel motors.
You know, who's gonna,
My recommendation is that there would be a third party
Yeah,
and be a customer of the utility.
yeah. We have.
there you go.
I don't think the utility should be in the business of owning charging
No.
stations.
Yeah, we don't wanna own the gas station.
No, we'll sell power. Sell them the power.
Yeah. Interesting.
So,
That's good.
Sorry, Tim, we didn't wait.
Well, you gotta think about it though, if, inflation's going up, when inflation comes down, we get a better rate than it's costing us for the lag time. But over the lifetime, inflation's always gonna.
It's always down.
Just like the stock.
in my lifetime.
Stock market's never gonna get down to 10,000.
And, you know, in years
So we're always lagging behind collecting.
in years past, utilities used to avoid rate adjustments, general inflationary rate adjustments, because they had growth. There's not much growth. At least there hasn't been, starting to come up now again. You know, they're getting more subdivisions and whatnot. But for many years, there wasn't any growth.
It's for,
Considering you've already had.
maybe the plastic would be it.
I'll give you my card.
Oh, good.
I can't imagine what Epic's growth added to Verona. You know, power lines, geez. Trip, how
That's
many
probably
times?
Alliant.
Big,
Yeah, that's MTD or Alliance.
Yeah, it's probably Alliant because it's out in the country. It's not. Verona doesn't have one.
I mean, they probably take more power from Alliance than the whole rest of the community.
But Alliant
Maybe.
covers all of Verona.
They got their own wind generator.
They're not like us. We have our own utility.
Yeah, which is only, there's only what, like 50 something in the state?
We have 51 members.
51.
Well,
41 in Wisconsin. There are 82 municipal utilities in Wisconsin.
For a while, they were.
Yeah, well, they finally got our.
We represent,
Yeah, 2 years to get on.
Thank you, Ken. That was really helpful.
Otherwise, those that, the ones you aren't representing are on their own, so they aren't in the collective,
some of them are, some of them
a different.
are on, you know, they take the market. Sometimes they get burned.
Yeah.
Last year they got burned.
That's cool.
Well, thank Thank you for.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to talk to this stuff.
Next week,
You get tired. I'm
Okay, moving on. Item B, consideration discussion special event permit for booze, brews, and food trucks, June 24th, 2023.
We discussed this at the subcommittee level, everything was in place, Jeff said everything was in place, so I'm gonna go ahead and.
Second.
Is it basically the same as last year?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Consideration discussion operator's license for Julie Claire. Yep.
All good.
Okay.
All good.
Make a motion to. approve operator license for Julie Claire.
Motion and second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item D, consideration discussion 2024 budget proposed timeline and procedures. Chelsea, Lauren,
Yeah. So this is on page 21. Budget is quickly approaching, so I wanted to lay out kind of the major milestones of that process, so you guys are all aware. So obviously today we're approving the timeline. At the next meeting, I'd like to talk with the board about some goals for 2024. I believe the board maybe several years ago, maybe did some goal setting, and I'd like to maybe bring that back, at least to have a kind of a general conversation about some of the goals that the board would like to see in the budget, and then staff can work on kind of incorporating that through our process. So the kind of major things, we'd also like to bring the budget through committee meetings, so that will happen in August. And then finance personnel will review in September with the wage recommendations for non-union employees. We would do budget workshops in October and hoping to do the public hearing and adopt the budget in November.
There's nothing out of the ordinary here from the past 2 years, is there? No. I'm gonna be approved of budget timeline.
motion and second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Consideration discussion ordinance 23-03 to repeal and recreate section 269-2 of the municipal code of the village of New Glarus. Hotel, motel, room tax. That's on page 22.
Yep.
Lauren?
That was a recommendation from the Tourism Commission. They were reviewing the room tax reports from the past few years, and a discussion came up on adjusting the share of the room tax to provide the village a little bit more funds for administrative costs for administering the room tax. So that would adjust the share, not the tax itself. So the tax will still be at 5%, but the share will now be adjusted. Well, if you pass this, will be adjusted 85% to the chamber, 12% to the village, and then a remaining 3%, which is the same, that's returned to the business.
And how did we come up with those percentages?
Oh.
We stuck them to the wall and figured which one would stick.
It's arbitrary.
Yeah, we just came up
The
with it.
village can go up to 30%, can keep up to 30%. We're currently keeping 7, so we felt that 12 was a fair adjustment for now, and we can revisit it future years and see if that's being earned.
And that covers, increases in salaries, say.
We have,
Mainly administrative costs, because it comes in, and we collect it, and then we disperse it back out to the chamber.
Is 12% minimal, or were you cutting it close, or do you feel comfortable with that?
I think I feel comfortable, with the agreement that we'll set it at 12 and then we'll revisit it. We I don't think we've ever revisited this or visited this since the ordinance has been in
What's
place.
the gross?
I'm sorry, what's the
The
gross?
gross,
room
right.
tax?
Yeah.
I don't
It
know.
varies
I'd have to
every
look
year.
through more.
We had a.
Approximately, what is it?
Well, we just send them a check for how much.
I wanna say
Yeah.
50,
What was it?
200,
Hmm?
250,
$250,000?
Rebecca?
Oh, we received 82,000.
Yeah, we just had a,
Right.
memorandum on
Right,
that, one
yeah.
of our last
Yeah.
meetings.
So
It
what
was
is
like
it?
82,000.
Well, that's what the chamber receives, and then we receive our cut of it.
So that was 90%,
100, like 100.
82 to 90% of the collection.
It was a 93% reflection,
Oh, because
right?
Because of
A
the
90.
the business is
3%. Well, I think,
My question is, how much time do you guys spend on the administrator?
I mean, frankly, the room tax is not just as simple as collecting it and dispersing it. There's quite a bit that goes on and talking to, we're, every few months, we're looking for new Airbnbs and vacation rentals that go on the market. There's we have a ton in New Glarus because it is a tourist destination. Every year, at the beginning of the year, we send out, communication to all of our property owners that explain the room tax policy with all the forms. We're trying to get that to go via email to eliminate some of those expenses, but our property owners like hard copy. So we're trying to eliminate the expense there. We collect every quarter, so that's 4 times a year that we collect from them, and then we issue that check to the chamber. The fourth quarter kind of dives in, obviously ends in December, so it kind of carries over to the next year, so it's delayed a little bit on our cost. But there's a considerable amount of work. I mean, obviously now that Deanna and I know what we're doing and can maybe make some of those processes a little bit more efficient, I'm hoping to decrease that workload a little bit, but
Do we have any comparables to other communities?
we actually are usually the ones, from my experience, that get asked how we manage it, just because New Glarus is pretty unique in that we have so many of them for such a small village, so, I think the state statutes regarding room tax are not super clear, as in Airbnb and VRBO can pay tax on behalf of their vacation property owners, but they don't have to tell us what property they're paying for, how much for each property they're paying for. We just have to trust that they're paying us what they're supposed to be paying us, which is really hard to track. So we have spreadsheets and we do our best.
I've been down that path with this stuff,
Mhm.
and the big boys always give you incentives to do it right and take it away
Mhm.
when you don't.
Mhm.
So think about that in terms of your rules and stuff, but you have to incent them to do it right and take it off your back. If you keep taking it, it's not a malevolent thing, it just, they're not concentrating on it.
Right.
But, we have millions of dollars, which are incentives to get it right.
I'm gonna move,
And it's usually just one or two out of a whole
Excuse me.
bunch, that are the trouble.
excuse me, I'm gonna make a motion to repeal and regrade section 269-2 of municipal code.
Second.
all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Consideration discussion resolution 2315, appointing limited term employee public works labor, page 23.
George, you the same amount of hours as last year?
I could have swore that our public works last year had 500 hours. Total. And I wanna know where those hours are.
I copied over exactly what's on the budget last year.
So this is how many hours he had from last year?
Correct. We used the we used the 2022 budget structure for the 2023 budget as far as hours go. We didn't change anything with the hours.
Is the, and I don't recall from last year, were we at 15 last year?
Correct.
Okay.
So this is the 2%.
So this labor, Joe, will be just strictly under you and working, like, changing stripes and streets and stuff like that.
Streets. Yep, streets. If I want him to go work in parks, he'll work in parks. If I want him to work anything, he is gonna be paid on his hours to public.
Okay.
And I make a motion that we approve James Nelson as an L.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Item G. Consideration discussion 2316 to 20 limited term employee for parks and recreation labor. Okay.
30 cents.
Huh?
How come 30 cents?
What?
One gets $15.30, one gets 15.
Brand new employee for one that's returning.
And we use the same amount of hours as,
No, this is a new position that we
Oh,
budgeted from, yes.
I got it. Okay,
Move to approve.
second,
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Item H, consideration discussing resolution 2217 to appoint lifeguards, water safety instructors, and field supervisors.
This is budgeted, right?
Correct.
I'm gonna move we approve the resolution R 2317.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion?
And the starred ones, there's money in the budget when they do.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, we work with our pool director, Megan, there'd be budget for specific pay levels for lifeguards, and you take that bottom number and make sure that you can work in, she hires, so.
Okay, thank you.
I did want to make a quick note here, we will be adjusting pool hours this year slightly, given limited staffing ability. So I just wanted to make you guys aware that this summer, Monday through Friday, 1 to 5, and 5:30 to 8, Saturdays 1 to 7, Sundays 1 to 6. We'll get that information out to the public, but just wanted to make you aware that pool hours will be adjusted
Slightly,
Okay, we have a motion second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Item I, consideration discussion rescheduling July 4th village board meeting. The fourth falls on Tuesday. Move it to Wednesday the 5th, is everybody?
everybody out of town with that, or everybody around there?
I'm,
I don't know if they'll be traveling home.
yeah, well, exactly, yeah.
You know, they could be traveling.
You can also do Zoom if people are traveling.
How many would like a,
Matters not.
more time later?
Travels on the 4th of July.
Seems like everybody's okay.
Okay, so we're gonna do fifth?
If the board is comfortable with that.
Second.
Who travels on the fifth?
We have a motion and second.
Okay, it's the fifth then,
Change
the
the
third?
time to travel.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carried. Parks and Rec, consideration discussion charging station at Village Park, it's on page 27.
I trust everyone has.
Joe, what about the charging
Yes.
station? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Okay,
Okay, we've discussed it at the committee level
okay.
a couple of times. The only big question we had was location. Did we decide on that?
Yeah.
We did,
South side,
South, yep, this side of the table, kind of by that one pine tree.
okay.
Okay.
And, I looked again today, the truth shouldn't be a problem. So,
I'll make a motion to approve that. Did you make a motion?
no, I'm waiting for someone.
To approve the charging station.
Okay, we have a motion and second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Public works and safety, consideration discussion ordinance 2304 to respect section 288-21H of the municipal code of the village of New Blair's parking regulations. It's on page 31.
So moved.
Second.
Okay,
This would remove the no parking signs at Garden Park, which was recommended by, I think, Parks and Public Works.
okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Consideration discussion special assessment, Third Avenue between Third Street and Eighth Street, page 32.
we were there, there's nothing we can do about it, everybody was fine with it, so let's move on. I'm gonna make a motion that we approve those special assessments for third and eighth.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item C, consideration of discussion qualification-based selection of engineer for water reservoir. Page 36. And this is something we had to, we have to get 3 of them?
We just had to put it out for getting qualification statements. We received 2. We took this to Public Works. That's how we thought Town and Country would be the best, given that they're already our water engineer. But it was Town and Country and Strand that both submitted qualifications. So the Public Works Committee recommended it for them.
So both enrollment or contract?
That will be the next discussion.
I didn't know that was a thing.
I'm gonna go ahead and approve the, engineer for the water reservoir.
Second. Larry, you seconded?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Consideration discussion of water reservoir tank option selection, page 42.
Alright, so, Town and Country provided options for the water reservoir. After, our consultants and staff kind of reviewed the options, we think the pre-stressed concrete is the best option. It's the least kind of maintenance heavy option. They also look pretty nice. I didn't include all the pictures, but they have some really nice looking, concrete reservoir. So this was also reviewed by Public Works and they recommended moving forward with the pre-stressed.
So, wow. I just want to ask a question, but.
Something to
Something
second,
second
yes,
first.
and then we can. Okay. Okay.
So what do we have now?
Steel. We have steel that's 300,000 gallons, and we want the same size, 300,000 gallons, only won't be steel. The steel paints, we have to paint every 15 years, reline the inside, everything. Concrete tanks are less maintenance. They look really nice. I wish those pictures were in there. But this water tower is going to be up on this hill where you'll be able to probably see it from Highway 69. And in our planning commissioner, or who was that guy? Was it
Planning consultant.
planning consultant said that we should make it more earthly colors, not something that just sticks out around the residential area that they're trying to build up there. So we should just make it like natural colors. The most that we would have to do is spray it off. It'll collect dust. So I'm kind of hoping that the fire department would want to do training and blow water at a water tower, maybe a little bit more and wash it off. The only thing that we would have to do is decide if you really want anything on it that says the Village of Blair's or anything, and that's your decision. That company will put them on. Or we just leave it.
I think at
It's
the,
a natural color.
at the subcommittee level, we talked about it being least intrusive on the landscape.
So we would like have our names on it.
Well, yours, but not ours.
And we don't have to decide design right now. We just wanted to get a sign off on the actual materials of it. We can come back with some design options.
Chalet.
Swiss,
Or like the brewery, the big barn.
big Swiss cross.
Yes,
There you go.
yes, there's no.
I don't know.
Okay, we have a motion and a
Yeah,
second.
yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Of course, we have a lot of time.
Okay, president report, committee appointment. Are we all good with that?
You were gonna ask Larry about appointing to the historical preservation committee.
We have one vacancy, yes, Larry. Do you know anybody that would be interested in, serving on historic preservation?
Besides me.
Yeah. If you think
Oh,
about it,
yeah,
give it some thought and see if you can
Okay.
come up with someone.
okay.
'Cause we just
And since we're, only came back in '07.
Yeah.
You're still historic.
Anybody who's there,
You're still historic.
you are,
Do you have to be historical to be on the historical?
or historical,
And all the information on the committee appointment spreadsheet, it
okay,
was updated, they needed it, so
yeah, it should have been.
please make sure that, you know, I reviewed it multiple times, so everybody's
Thank you.
addresses, phone numbers, everything should be current.
Good. Thank you, yeah, I just checked it a couple of days ago.
And you will see this again.
So we need a motion to approve the committee appointments.
I will.
Chuck, second. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed. I have one other thing. Sorry. Hey, this wasn't on the, but it's gonna be under the president's report. It's, 2022 National Police Week proclamation. Whereas the Congress and the President of the United States have designated May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and the week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week, and whereas members of the law enforcement agency of the Village of New Glarus play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the Village of New Glarus, specifically Police Chief Jeff Sterling and all the New Glarus Police Department officers and staff, and whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of the law enforcement agency, and that matters of our law enforcement agency recognizes their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against the violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. Whereas men and women of law enforcement agency of the Village of New Glarus increasingly provide a vital public service. Now therefore, I, Roger Truckman, President of the Village of New Glarus, Board of Trustees, call upon all citizens of the Village of New Glarus, upon all patriotic, civic, and educational organizations to observe the week of May 14th to the 20th, 2023, as Police Week, with appropriate ceremonies and observances in which all of our people may join in commemorating law enforcement officers, past and present, who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to the community, and is in doing have established for themselves an inevitable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all citizens. Dated the 16th day of May, 2023.
Thanks,
Oh,
Jeff.
thank you, Jeff. Okay, at this time, we're gonna go into closed session, gotta read this last time. Announcement, the village board will adjourn into closed session pursuant to state statute 1985 1C, deliberating or negotiating the investment of public funds or conducting any specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session and consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercising responsibility required in closed session and may convene in an open session pursuant to